Very, very, very important program. A collateral one is Rising Stars, where we can attract or we can retain what we think are our best and brightest junior research talent. Again, not going through every single one of these, I'll just collectively say, if you're an entrepreneur, we have every financing tool you would likely ever want. What's not up here is, I guess it is, proof of concept. I would somewhat facetiously, maybe inappropriately, call this walking around money. This is really a program intended to effectively package intellectual property, perhaps rising out of an institution with management, with a proof of concept or market validation, do the initial out licensing, hire in the initial CEO or whatever it may be. We have a seed fund where we can invest directly, typically through convertible notes, but we can invest directly into early stage companies. We have a fund of funds where we've invested directly into venture funds that invest in Kansas bioscience companies. We have a net operating loss program. We have tax incentives even beyond that. And of course, almost any tool that a company would need to relocate into the state or to expand in the state, we've got that too. So again, 3 asset classes, but unique investment tools that are highly focused and highly specialized around each of those asset classes. Again, I won't go through every single one of these. One that I won't mention later on in the presentation are our centers of innovation. These are very unique. I think most around the room have heard of centers of excellence or something like that. These are industry cluster or research topical areas, typically inside academic institutions. The idea is to support collaborative R&D or the transition of R&D between researchers and companies in a particular cluster. We don't do that. Our Center of Excellence program is called the Centers of Innovation. They're managed to a number by industry. They're all not-for-profit, and industry decides how to invest the funds. Very, very unique model. Very unique model. We think that gives the researchers a quality of insight, a quality of market pull, demand, however you want to put it. It also allows, in many respects, industry to better tap into and better access, if I can put it that way, researchers, specialized facilities, talent inside these institutions. So the centers of innovation are in those clusters that I mentioned earlier, plant biology, biomaterials, so on. We also have R&D vouchers. We can foster collaboration between researchers and industry by cost sharing that collaboration. So if the project is $1 million, we think it's going to result in the commercialization or the out-licensing of a very innovative technology that will fundamentally move the needle inside a company. We can literally cost share that up to 50%. Very interesting program for us. This is something that Brian also asked me to put up here. Again, this is your slide. You can keep it. I will interpret it for you because these are largely internal and you're not going to be expected to know what all these acronyms actually mean. I will simply point out a few things. One, on the left, of course, is what we've paid into research programs. On the right is what we've actually gotten in terms of a return. I'm just going to make a few, hopefully, relevant observations. Just because we've put a lot of money into a project doesn't mean we won't get a return over time. I think everyone can understand that. This is a static picture of how those investments are faring. But I'm going to point out the Eminent Scholar Program. We've made to date about $4.5 million in investments into scholars. And to date, those scholars have returned $52.8 million in federal funds. That's just a massive return. And you can well imagine, growing that is only going to yield a more massive return. So when I've said we're a relatively small research and development infrastructure, and that we cannot and will not tolerate incremental growth, and so what is the strategy to grow it dynamically? That's the strategy. And this is a big deal for us. Again, we don't get to that #1 ranking in total growth of percentage growth of NIH financing without programs like this. And again, the funding mechanism has extreme relevance here because we can't invest in scholars all at once. I mean, University of Kansas can't do that. Wichita State can't do that. I would be somewhat surprised if any academic institution could do that alone. So very big deal. I don't expect you to understand what NBAF is yet. I will tell that story in a few slides, but this is a federal lab that's now been sited and is being built in Manhattan, Kansas. You'll see that we didn't invest a dime to go after that lab. We invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of leadership to go after that lab. But the impact that will have in our economy is going to be absolutely extraordinary. Now you'll also want to see the very same thing for commercialization programs. I'll just keep this up here and maybe talk about a few things. Yes, we do make direct equity investments. The Bioscience Authority has made quite a few in the last fiscal year in particular. $7 million total to date. Those funds leverage $30.5 million in private funds from other sources, typically venture investors. But the one I'm going to point out that I think is probably obvious to every person in this room is that big blue thing on the right-hand side, expansion attraction. $7 million into it, $203 million out of it. That's just extraordinary. You have heard states have closing funds. Texas has the Emerging Technology Fund or whatever it is. I don't know if Wisconsin has a closing fund. This is our closing fund. If you're a bioscience company and you're looking to expand in Kansas, we're a state that gets it. We can understand it. We can model your growth, quite literally model your growth probably better than you can. And we've been pretty aggressive about that. We're also a state that, to a certain extent, is bordered by others that don't necessarily have the same passion or investment or resources into the biosciences. And to a certain extent, we've been a beneficiary of that as well. I will also point out here, like I did in the earlier one, just because we don't have a return on that side, doesn't mean the program's not working, doesn't mean it's ineffective, it just means the payoff is going to be much longer. The one that I think is obvious there is the Centers of Innovation. Pretty big amount of money, 5.3 going in, more or less the same coming out at this point, and that's probably obvious to you. Investment examples. Here I will really just highlight some things that we've done on the research side, and then I'll give you some examples of things we're doing on the commercialization side. And please, we do so much in these two areas. These are only intended to be examples of how the KBA operates, but also why our funding mechanism and our investment thesis are so important as we look to be really impactful in these clusters. So I described the animal health industry, very large concentration of companies in that particular cluster in the Kansas City region. Some of the real major players in the industry are located there. Fully 1/3 of the global industry is in fact located there. They are somewhat, I wouldn't say household names, but I think you probably know many of these companies to a certain extent. You know, in each of these clusters, we sort of have an investment approach, an investment thesis. Each of them is slightly different. But you can probably understand that clearly it's all about maintaining the strength and the quality of research and really growing that as large as we possibly can. It's all about entrepreneurship. It's all about keeping the companies that are here going as well, and of course enhancing that collaboration. These are selected investments that add to that big pie chart that I mentioned to you. You know, I literally put research at the top of it. Those scholars that we've recruited in this particular cluster have been extraordinarily successful. One researcher, Dr. Jürgen Richt, we recruited from Iowa State University. He just won a $12 million Center of Excellence from the Department of Homeland Security in emerging zoonotic and animal diseases. It's that kind of huge incremental growth that I think we're getting out of these scholars. NBAF, I'll mention more later, $650 million new federal lab being built in Manhattan, Kansas. The rest, for the most part, are relatively small entrepreneurial ventures. And they are looking to either grow in the region or move into the region because of this density of concentration of major players there.